At over 675,000, the number of people in the US reported to have died of COVID-19 has surpassed the death toll of the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic.
The COVID-19 pandemic is now the deadliest in American history.
Now, almost 2 years since the first known case of COVID-19, the jury is still out on how the pandemic started.
No one knows, including me, 100%.
Two main theories prevail. One is that the virus naturally leapt from animals to humans. The other is that it escaped from a research lab.
COVID-19 may have leaked from a lab in Wuhan, China.
Chinese lab at the center of so many questions.
A September 17 article in The Lancet, one of the world's best-known medical journals, could help drive inquiry into the origin of COVID-19. This follows the Biden administration's 90-day investigation, which finished up in August, yielding no conclusion.
It's an inconclusive report. A number of elements of the intelligence community feel one way about this. Other elements feel another way about it.
The Lancet article is penned by 16 scientists who call for an objective, open, and transparent scientific debate about the origin of the novel coronavirus. They question how valid the proof is in support of a natural origin and argue that the lab leak theory is plausible. Although considered by many prominent scientists the most likely origin of the pandemic, there are significant barriers to proving the virus leaked from the maximum biosecurity P4 lab in Wuhan.
美国政府通过情报机构搞所谓的溯源报告，不是为了寻找新冠病毒起源的事实真相，而是为了推卸美国自身抗疫失败的责任，向中国甩锅推责。
At the same time, we continue to see aggressive posturing by the China regime on the international stage. Aerial maneuvers in Taiwan airspace, Chinese troops in Indian-controlled territory, Chinese maritime militia in Japanese waters, to name just a few. The Chinese Communist Party just celebrated its 100th anniversary.
中国共产党万岁!
On that day, it signaled just how ready it is for aggressive confrontation, should it feel that it's being targeted by a foreign power.
Xi Jinping made a comment, if countries try to bully China, you will face broken heads and bloodshed.
中国人民也绝不允许任何外来势力欺负、压迫、奴役我们。谁妄想这样干，必将在14多亿中国人民用血肉铸成的钢铁长城面前碰得头破血流。
For God's sake, that is your 100th birthday. Enjoy, celebrate it. Nobody, normal people would not threaten its neighbor during his 100th birthday.
But is there really any more to Xi Jinping's fancifully worded threats than bluff and bluster? Or is this just the Chinese Communist Party or CCP's best reaction to the global suspicion it finds itself under? With the world intently scrutinizing it for its possible role in causing the pandemic, it lashes out like a criminal suspect backed against a wall.
This is the most consequential period that we have lived through, with the possible exception of the Cuban Missile Crisis and the crisis at Checkpoint Charlie in Berlin.
We have to know why the Chinese communists hid information, why they have stopped the investigations into the origins of the COVID-19 virus, because we do not ever want this to happen again.
Various theories have been put forth to explain the origin of the pandemic. Of these, the lab leak theory seems to be gaining the most traction. Even certain Biden admin officials are now saying it's as plausible as the idea that the virus spread directly from animals to humans. At this point, I felt the need to get my head into the big picture of how the now infamous WIV lab really operates. A lab which, like all P4 labs, is touted as being absolutely unleakable.
In 2004, there was a lab leak situation in Beijing. At the time, totally 9 cases of lab leak incidents was identified. It was related to a virus stock. The SARS coronavirus stock was not completely inactivated. So the researcher who handled the virus got infected.
But that was in a P3 lab, not a P4 lab. There are only about 40 P4 labs in the world. They're the highest ranking experimental facility on the planet. They store the most dangerous and deadly viruses. Thus, they are designed as the bunkers that viruses cannot escape from. From approval to construction, the $44 million Wuhan Institute of Virology took more than a decade to complete. It was built in an area away from floods and can withstand a magnitude 7 earthquake. It has the most stringent sterilization and protection procedures for lab personnel. They must pass through 10 gates to reach the core area. The 7 innermost gates use an interlocking system. This means that if one door is not closed, another cannot be opened. Alongside the layers of negative pressure, air can only flow towards the center and is discharged after purification. This prevents a possible virus from escaping through the air. Another key point is the animals. The P4 lab animals are SPF, specific pathogen-free animals. They do not carry bacteria or viruses. They are born via cesarean section or several generations of sterile cesarean sections. They live their whole lives in a sterile environment, eat sterile food, and reproduce in sterile conditions. After being experimented upon, the P4 lab dispose of their carcasses. Live animals cannot leave these facilities. And if you're not yet convinced of how disaster-proof P4 labs are, then know that they also do not allow single-person operation. The scientists are always being supervised in their duties, and on top of this, they're monitored off-site via surveillance cameras. This setup is based on the first European P4, John Mériot P4 laboratory in France. Any possible opportunity for a leak is virtually blocked. For a P4 lab, there's 3 safety breaches that would have to occur in tandem for a leak to occur. These include, for one, the experimenter violating the rules and taking the virus out of the lab. Secondly, the guy supervising him neglecting his duties. And also thirdly, for the external monitor to also be asleep at the helm. A leak could only happen if all 3 conditions were met simultaneously. Dr. Sean Lin was a lab director at the Department of Defense's largest biomedical research arm, the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. He believes that a lab leak could have started the pandemic.
So you can have a very perfect lab protocol. You have a perfect SOP in the book, but if your personnel did not stick to it when they practice it, so that will be a big problem. In 2019, in Lanzhou in China, one of the company called Zhongmu is China veterinarian pharmaceutical company. They were producing Brucella vaccines, but one of the reagent got expired. The Brucella did not kill before they were made into an inactivated vaccine. So eventually, more than 10,000 people in Lanzhou got infected with Brucella.
Aside from this, my colleagues from China and Taiwan pointed me to an online article allegedly written by scientists from China. It suggests an interesting theory, that for all its safeguards, the WIV Maximum Safety P4 lab has a potential loophole: its incinerator. It's in this respect, in the disposal of animal carcasses, that decontamination is not entirely controlled by the lab's internal processes. P4 lab design does not allow for animal carcasses to be internally incinerated. This would present a contamination risk. Instead, they are incinerated outside, through a centralized service. Within the lab, carcasses are just given a surface treatment with formalin or similar chemicals. They are then sealed, put in a freezer, and transported to the outside for centralized incineration. But here again, there's virtually no opportunity for a leak to occur. There's no cause for the external contractor to do anything but deliver the carcasses to the facility and incinerate them. After all, what else are you going to do with formalin-treated animal carcasses? You can't exactly sell those at the local market, right? Wrong. Don't forget that we're talking about communist China here. There's plenty of rules and regulations to control how things should be done. But in a system where corruption, bribery, and shady dealing is rife, all the way through to the top of the Politburo, when no one is watching, anything goes. In communist China, eating formalin-treated animal meat is not unheard of. A simple check of China's search engine, Baidu, reveals many news stories of not-so-conscientious food producers using formalin to treat rotten meat.
有经验的水产商用甲醛浸泡，浸泡之后就像给海鲜化了妆一样。
Here's how it's done. Don't try this at home, folks. First, the spoiled meat is soaked in formalin and rinsed with water.
在爆料人所提供的视频中，可以看见至少有7、8条死猪横尸地面，部分猪已经开始发黑变质，而有些被剖开的猪和猪肉都被泡在了福尔马林中。
Then all the aromatic seasoning is added in to override the bad smell. Afterwards, the average person could scarcely tell the difference between eating this and eating fresh meat. There are even posts from pregnant women online asking what they should do after they eat formalin meat. So sadly, the idea that animal carcasses from the lab are sold at the market isn't all that far-fetched. And if you think this kind of gross miscarriage of hygiene is just the realm of the lowbrow opportunists wanting to make a quick buck, think again. Last year, Li Ning from China Agricultural University got 12 years in prison for embezzling $6 million US worth of research funds, 1.5 million of which came from the sale of genetically modified cows and milk from his lab.